The pagan ritual. Why are you wearing a mask? Ritual is a spiritual psychodrama of consciousness, a deliberate action taken to facilitate changes to the whole of the environment people exist in, starting with the mental landscape of people themselves. The place where our reality exists is first born in a dream. Ritual facilitates the mechanics of change through specific mechanisms, a rhythm to sync, to merge and flow with a magnetic drawing one on the path toward transmutation. Rituals are vehicles driving home those ideas, the information, the data, the symbols, which upon transmission create the language by which new society members communicate after they are initiated. This new language imparts a new understanding through definitions that the ritual generates. A ritual initiation introduces and inducts one into the way, a new way of life or worldview, a program to guide beliefs and actions, enabling the initiate to become a full and true member of the new society. Notes that the ritual isn't always a conscious action. Not everyone partaking in a ritual is aware that they are. New patterns of thoughts of significance are drummed in, conscious or not, of the ritual in which the initiate is partaking. An initiation ritual typically involves 3 stages. Right, everybody, now let's see if any of this sounds familiar to you. The first stage is isolation, for purification. In this stage, the initiate is separated from the mundane. Did you know that the word mundane literally means of the world? The initiate is largely removed from the otherwise familiar persons, places and things that they are used to. In order to be cleared of them, the initiate is forced to become detached and insulated, purged and purified. An essential element of this separation from one's typical environment is the suspension of the normal rules of living that one is used to. Most of the initiate's senses will become commanded and regulated at this time. In other words, the majority of what the initiate sees, hears, smells, touches and tastes is deliberately controlled. In the ritual, these senses may be bombarded, modified, limited or deprived, but regardless, perceptions and experiences are ultimately overseen by the high priest and priestess, directing the ritual's performance. The ritual enables new light to shine through a newly opened window of thoughts. With nowhere else to go except the places that were allowed, the insulated, isolated initiate may be forced to confront his or her own reflection and inner shadows that have been ignored or buried somewhere deep beneath an average day-to-day. These things suddenly become unavoidable. Triggers are detonated, another purged, just as they involve surrender. Initiation rituals also involve sacrifice, both the tangible that can be held in the hand and the intangible, such as behaviours, must be given up by requirement. And after all, for something to be given, something has to be taken, a token of submission, an ounce of blood, a pound of clay to be remoulded. Whether dramatically overt or deceitfully subtle, the ritual reinterprets reality. A new definition of reality is given. Training in the form of new behaviours and knowledge, including myths and codes, are introduced. Things necessary for new members to function properly in society are being inducted into, are all imbued during this time. Repetition is typical, as its use helps hammer home the spell on the initiates. The wearing of masks for initiates. Now, the wearing of masks during an initiation ritual is almost always required. Masking as traditionally played an important role in the rituals of these kinds. Disguised under a mask and hidden away, the initiate is more easily able to transcend the self, pushed forward toward that invisible line between physical and spiritual realms. Trauma. Trauma is yet another key aspect of this kind of initiation ceremony. It's used mostly to personalize and fear of death. Sometimes in the ritual, the act of dying, a ceremonial role is played. The dark beyond the darkness, the yawning abyss. Only after death is confronted can the initiate become symbolically resurrected and reborn. While the process that is playing out is quite coordinated and sophisticated, in reality, it may be executed in a purposefully confusing manner so that the goalposts seem to keep moving back and forth, up and down, here, now, there, immediately and after. This renders the initiate unable to find solid mental ground from which to make logical sense of anything. This disorientation is the key in transformation in ritual. The uncertain timing generates a general anxiety, further removing the initiate from reality while leaving him or her more susceptible to a type of Pavlovian conditioning. This weakens the defences, just as a virus would. Only this has the potential to break down the individual much more completely than a virus. Whatever the finer details, the previous way of life is shed like an old skin at the end of the ritual. An end that comes before the new beginning. The change begins. The transition. This is the second phase, the transition. As the old self symbolically dies and passes away, initiate descends into a state of liminality, a sort of fever dream purgatory, nowhere land, the void in the middle. Thus the old self dies as the initiate is purified. The initiate is now a white room, a blank canvas, washed, primed, and desperate for paint. At the same time, his old existence and way of life dies, and the initiate, transcending it, is gradually being processed, reprogrammed, and incorporated into his new environment, reformed, reconstituted, and rebirthed into a new world that awaits at the end of the tunnel. The integration. At some point in the future, we will see the final phrase of the transformation ritual. Does any of what's being described now to you sound familiar? The only question that remains is, do you consent? I'll leave you the link so you can go through it and read it yourself. Thanks for listening, guys.